Wild food, that's what hunting and gathering is all about. This is a journey into Britain's ancient way of life as we attempt to find the foods eaten by our hunter-gatherer ancestors. Britain was once a land of hunter-gatherers, but we know virtually nothing about them. One of the things that's really interested me is trying to understand what they were actually eating. From the weapons they left behind, we've got a bit of an idea about their hunting, but when it comes to foraging and gathering, it's a mystery. But if we could travel back in time, there's so much the Stone Age hunter-gatherers of Britain could show us. And the one place we'd be guaranteed to meet them is the coast. In this programme, I want to explore the coastal resources they might have used, piecing together the fragments of their knowledge that still remain. For the past 10 years, I've been working closely with Professor Gordon Hillman from University College London, combining my practical knowledge with his expertise as a paleo-ethnobotanist.
An ethnobotanist is a person who studies plants as they're used by people. A paleo-ethnobotanist is somebody who studies those same relationships in the past. And we often refer to paleo-ethnobotanists as archaeobotanists. And there aren't very many of us around.
We're starting our journey in winter on the coast. It's the place we've made one of our most exciting discoveries.
It's a nice patch. Yes, there's some good buds here, aren't there?
Yeah, that's good. The unlikely-looking sea kale may once have been a staple food. People have known about the above-ground parts of this plant being edible for a very long while. The young shoots, when they start to come up in February, you can blanch them by covering them with mulch or even a plastic bag or a bucket. And then when they've grown to the size of a broccoli tip, you can cook them just like broccoli. But the most important part is the underground root, which can also be eaten. Of course, it's the sort of thing that our ancestors would have known and relied upon. For me, one of the joys of this journey is being able to combine my practical knowledge with Gordon's special understanding of the links between plants. That's what led us to sea kale. It's going to take a while to dig this root up. You can see how big it is. What's also interesting is that sheltering under this plant are these snails. It doesn't take too much imagination to realise that if our ancestors were digging this up for food, then there was some protein to go with it. And it's exactly what you see when you work with hunter-gatherers around the world today. If there's an opportunity available in association with another food, obviously it's going to be made use of. Which is exactly the sort of thing we saw when I took Gordon to Australia. He'd never seen hunter-gatherers in action, and it was a great chance for us to see how important food and food gathering is, not just to their diet, but to their whole way of life. One of the biggest lessons was how it all begins with the hunt for energy-giving caloric staples, plants that provide carbohydrates without burning up too many in their collection. And that's what we're after here.
That's a good route.
Pretty good, that one.
But that's the size we often encounter, so that's excellent. That's good here. Very good.
Well, I think we should have a drop of that, shouldn't we? I'll clean it up a little bit, shall I?
I think just take the rind off. And,
I think I will make a flint tool for this, Gordon. Should do the trick. Don't think we need much more than that, really.
You should scrape up quite easily with the rind. This is perfect.
Well, we've got a bit there, look. That's a good bit.
This discovery of the edibility of the roots of sea kale is probably our biggest breakthrough. There's always a problem about getting enough energy foods as a hunter-gatherer. And so caloric staples or potential caloric staples are always the focus of their searches. And this is a prime example of a potential caloric staple. And the number of plants that grow in shingle beach like this is vast. And these roots are often of that large size. So this is good eating, and raw particularly. So you haven't even got to bother to cook it. This is consistently edible, right round the coast.
It's one of the best wild foods we have, isn't it, really?
It is. Very, very sweet.
Yeah,
Very
you can taste the sugar in it.
So this gives a real lift to the blood sugar levels.
Foods like this are really exciting. As soon as you bite into it, you can taste the sugar, the energy that's stored within it. And for just a small amount of effort, we've got a massive amount of food, and it doesn't need cooking. What's interesting to me is that plants like this take us back to a diet that's been forgotten, and one that could take us right back to the very earliest hominids that walked here. Perhaps people who didn't even have the ability to make fire. That is for the archaeologists to discover. What's fascinating is we're tasting perhaps what was one of their most important foods. A great deal has changed since the Stone Age. Today, places like this need legal protection as sites of special scientific interest. So we've had to get permission to gather foods here legally. The last time hunter-gatherers walked our coast was a period known as the Mesolithic, literally the Middle Stone Age. It was a time when they would have used anything and everything available around them. Coastlines are always very important to hunter-gatherers because the sea literally quarries away at the land's surface, revealing all sorts of interesting resources, like this one here. You see that staining there? That's caused by iron, but it's not man-made iron. That's iron pyrites, and that was a very valuable resource in the past. But the easiest place to gather that is down the beach, where it's been washed out by natural erosion. There's lots of folklore about the origins of iron pyrites. One story is that these are the ends of lightning bolts where they've hit the ground, and when you see the radial patterns in the middle of it, you can really believe it. In these low points, the hollows, if you like, on the floor of the beach here, the pyrites gets washed in. And because it's heavy, very dense material, it sits there. Now, you find it in three kind of shapes. You find these long, elongated bits. They're not brilliantly useful for what I have in mind for this. You find knobbly nuggets like that. And the problem with those is that they'll crumble later on. And then occasionally you find real gems like this, where the edges have been rounded off and it's all smooth. Those are brilliant. And what this was used for was for producing sparks with flint for firelighting. And for those people who lived here on the coast, this was an easily found resource that they could have taken inland and traded. We can only guess what the value of this may have been back then. Further along the beach, Gordon's found a plant clinging to the base of the cliff that's long been traded as a delicacy, rock samphire. But what about the food value, Gordon?
Well, it's a green food and one that's available through the winter. Of course, it has a special role. There's not very many plants on the coastline that you can eat right through the winter. And of course, it'll have vitamin C and vitamin E in it as a green plant, and no doubt has antioxidant properties too. But I personally find it's rather over-pungent to eat raw, and even cooked, you don't want too much of it.
Yeah, I'll try a little bit. It's immediately you taste it. Oh, strong, almost an oily flavour. But I think for our hunter-gatherer ancestors, if you've been on the shore here, perhaps in the summer they could be catching mackerel here. In the winter, other fishes, obviously, or shellfish. They could bring them on shore, light a fire. You can throw a handful of this on, put the fish on, and steam it within the plant itself. It imparts its flavour to the fish, and there you are, an instant meal.
Absolutely.
The greens that are available on the coast seem to grow in abundance.
There's less competition for these plants on the coast. Not very many plants can tolerate the salt. So the ones that can romp away without the competition they'd have inland.
So there are coastal greens available throughout the winter. Like sea purslane, used by sailors around the world to prevent scurvy.
Marvellous plant. Hardly anybody uses it. It's amazing.
Or sea beet, a rich source of iron.
It tastes better than spinach. In fact, I really don't know why the green parts of this plant aren't sold in the markets.
Then there's sea radish, packed with magnesium, manganese, vitamin C, E and A, and other antioxidants. I get a real feeling that the knowledge and craft skills of these people gave them a sense of permanence. When you consider that flint was used as the bedrock of our technology for over 90% of human history, it's astonishing. The whole beach is covered in flint, but what I'm looking for is flint that's quite fresh out of the cliff, because that won't have been bowled around in the surf and been fractured all over. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to tap the flint. If I tap it and listen to the ring, if it's a good piece, it should have a real crystal sound like that. That means there aren't so many flaws in the flint that will cause me problems. Even so, when you open up a piece of flint, you never know what you're going to find. These fossils are often called inclusions, and they stop the shock waves passing exactly where I want them to go. I'm preparing a striking platform. It needs to be made robust by scraping, so creating a wedge from which I can strike blades. That's what I'm after, blades like that. Each of these is like a razor blade, basically. Very useful. It's flint that helps us to define the Mesolithic, the production of lots of little tools struck from the core, rather than large tools made from the whole thing. Hunter-gatherers are often on the move, travelling from one resource to another. Reliable sources of food would have been of particular importance. Rivers like this would have been vitally important. This is a salmon river. At the end of the summer, beginning of the autumn, salmon runs would force their way up this stream to spawn just a few kilometres upstream. And then later in the year, with the rains coming, you get the sea trout going up as well. And these are things their ancestors would have planted themselves beside to make full use of that food resource. They could have used spears or even traps woven from baskets like this. Traps like this would have been used particularly in tidal rivers to catch all sorts of fish and even eels on the current and the incoming tide. When I look in a river and I see a salmon, I see more than just a fish. I see an ambassador of the wild, a litmus by which we can judge the health of that natural environment, an environment that we still depend on today. I've got a bit of a hunch. I want to experiment with the use of rock samphire, and for that I'm going to use a piece of lime bark, an eel, and one of my flint blades. Today a lot of people will grab hold of the skin with a pair of pliers and pull straight down, but I'm taking my time. I want to do a careful job over it because I'm going to keep the skin intact, so that when I've taken the skin most of the way off, I'm then going to clean the eel and stuff it with the rock samphire and close it back up again. So I want to keep this skin in good condition so that it will seal in all of the juices from the cooking. So I'm going to take my time. Again, when I've worked with
indigenous groups around the world, there's really very little rush normally in the butchering of animals. Time is taken and a great deal of respect is shown to the animals that are used for food. It's coming down nicely now. Most of our waterways contain eels, would have been important for food in the past. The skins were also important, very tough skin. They were used to make the hinges on flails and even sometimes on doors. Like putting on a handle on a cricket bat. What I want to do is to cover the eel as much as possible with the hot sand here and with ashes to exclude oxygen. If I don't do that, the eel will burn. The skin burns quite readily and it'll burn before the fish is cooked through. So if I cover it in, that should make all the difference. I'll put the embers over it like that, keep the fire to one side, cover it with the embers and cook that for about 1 hour.
There's no point wasting a fire like this. It's the perfect opportunity to try cooking the sea kale.
It's quite a good haul there.
It is, for several people.
Over there, let's just stick a couple in.
But if they're as good cooked as they are raw, that'll be quite something.
Yeah. I think one of the things that's interesting is that the type of wood that we're burning, they're using these small bits, gives us an intense heat and changes the speed of our cooking.
So there's several controls involved here, several variables.
There are lots of variables. Fire is infinitely adaptable to your needs. I've even seen in a community where a group of men were cooking one animal, one man saying, no, can you give me a bit so I can cook it a slightly different way?
Ah, right.
Different preferences. You see how we're doing here with that's the eel. So I'm going to try and get it out now. That looks fine.
Yeah, it looks excellent.
I'll give you a little bit of...
Many thanks.
I think that will be hot.
Yes,
so.
I believe you.
Oh. Oh, it's very nice.
Oh, it's just cooling down a bit now. Oh.
How is it?
That's good.
Can you taste any samphire though?
I can actually, yes. There's a samphire taste to it. It's good.
Try a bit of the samphire. Yeah.
Thanks.
That is greatly improved. That has become a green, hasn't it?
It has. This is really
and it's wilted beautifully.
It's just about right.
It's almost like it's been wilted and sort of cooked in clarified butter with the fat.
It is. I know many people do eat it boiled, and enjoy it, but this is a much more subtle flavour.
That's delicious.
A very good green one.
You could put that on a menu in a top restaurant. Maybe not served up quite like this. But
We set out to use rock samphire as a flavouring, but succeeded in transforming the flavour of the samphire itself more than the eel.
I reckon those look... I think we can try one, shall we?
Should I do that?
Smell that.
That smells good. That smells like real food.
It does, doesn't it? It's funny, isn't it? There's a definite smell of what's edible and what isn't, and I think that was an important diagnostic tool, if you like.
I'm sure so.
When our ancestors were first exploring foods, we can identify lots of chemicals with our sense of smell. I thought we were going to have to scrape it, but we can actually peel the rind off.
If we can.
It comes off really well. And there's the core. Now that's hot.
It is hot.
It's the steam.
Oh, personal branding going on here.
You know what's happening there? You're just reliving. You're reliving probably what a 3 or 4 year old did for the first time sometime.
Yes, thanks, Ray. That's very reassuring.
You're soft.
This is softer, and yes, there is the difference in taste is suggesting that it would be more digestible.
Yep.
Even though raw, it was very, very crunchy and in fact delicious.
On a cold day, if I was hungry, that would be fantastic.
Yes, the rind is edible too, isn't it?
Yeah.
So there's no waste.
It's a great shame we haven't got more evidence for the use of the plant itself.
This is a problem with the nature of archaeological evidence. Tiny fragments of this in the fire are not going to be recognised as anything worth identifying from the outside.
No, give it another hour, it would be consumed.
It would, yes, it'd be turned to ash completely.
The more we discover, the more we realise how complex this way of life was. Food wasn't just about survival, it was about taste, variety, and health.
It's a blustery old day today. You know, one of the things I really love about Britain is that there are still places where you can look out and feel that it's a wild, ancient landscape. This is sea buckthorn. This plant, we find it here on the coastlines, but once this grew much more abundantly and much further inland. It's an incredibly useful plant.
Sea buckthorn is an amazing bush. You can see how well it's protected. The thorns come out from the stem and create this incredible barrier to predators. The berries themselves grow tight in, and it's just about impossible to pick them because as soon as you try, they burst. And that means you need a special technique to gather them.
What I'm after are these really heavy drupes of fruit here at the bottom of the bush. And it's a messy business, but I'm going to now squeeze the berries in to this container. You can see the juice is going where I want it to. You can see how much juice there is. Incredible plant. The smell is very, very pungent. At first, it's quite a sweet smell, but after a short while, it kind of becomes a little irritating. It smells like fermenting orange juice. It's amazing how quickly you can start to gather a considerable amount of fruit. Even though I'm stripping in the direction the thorns are growing, you do get pricked quite a lot when you're doing this. It's a tricky business.
With two of us gathering, it won't take long to get what we're after.
That's very fine, that's too fine. It's the only berry of its kind that matures late August or even earlier, and it persists on the bushes right through till early spring. And of course it's during the winter months that it's available, and this is when we haven't got other fruits to hand. So when all the other fruits have dropped off the trees, we've still got this sea buckthorn available. For our coastal hunter-gatherers in the Mesolithic, it would probably be of enormous importance as a source of nutrients that are in short supply during the winter months. Now in this particular case, of course, here in these berries on the bushes here, we have a huge quantity of vitamin A, large doses of vitamin C and vitamin E as well. And then on top of that, it's also got potassium, boron, manganese. It's a very rich source of nutrients.
There are parts of the world where it's highly sought after, even today.
It's probably the most popular tonic available in Russia today, and everywhere you go people are clamouring for this stuff, and when it comes into the shops there used to be queues for it. And I must say, whenever I've been in Moscow, it's the present I've been given most often.
It's an ancient plant that Gordon studied when he was asked to confirm the identity of finds made in caves in Greece.
There we go, Gordon. That's not a bad haul, is it?
That's pretty good.
I think what I'll do is I'll squeeze the berries a bit more.
Yes, plus the last brick.
So, tell me about that cave in Greece where this stuff was found.
Oh, yes, this Theopetra cave. It was in Thessaly, and it's a cave site, and they found charred remains of these seeds all over the floor. Well, of course, probably what had happened is they'd scooped off the dross, as we're going to do now, and tossed it across the cave. It dried, and then somebody lit a fire thereafter.
In fact, as I'm squeezing this, you can see the seeds floating onto the surface.
Indeed, yes.
Look, you can see these all the black seeds here. I can probably, just with my hands, scoop out a whole handful of seeds.
It's little
Yeah, those are all seeds, and those bits we don't want. So scoop those out. Maybe they're doing just like I'm doing now.
Indeed,
Maybe this was their method of sieving.
it could well have been. Quite a few spines in there still, aren't there?
There are quite a few. I keep finding the odd one, but they're not too bad. It's a fairly slow job, but the gathering is very quick.
Yes, as so often, the gathering can be done very speedily, but the processing is often a slow job, isn't it?
Yeah.
And this is where the energy costs come in.
I think this is very effective, what I'm doing here, as a way of getting rid of the seeds and things. But obviously we can speed things up because we've got a modern sieve.
That's right.
And I reckon we're at that point now. So pretty good return, isn't it?
It is a very good return.
What for? Half an hour's work?
Yes, it's very
That's
little.
not bad, and you think that that's all the vitamins that we've got in there.
Should we try it for flavour?
Yeah, why not? Go on.
Here we go. That's good, but it is sharp. It contains tartaric and malic acids for a start. Oh, God, that's very sharp. Try it, Rick.
Let's try some.
Ah.
This is good. This is like some great, hunter's initiation rite, isn't it?
That's not bad, is it?
Oh, that's sharp. The aftertaste is revolting.
I
But it's
don't know
not
about revolting.
The aftertaste is. It's going,
That's not bad. It's
no,
sharp.
it's going straight to the back of my throat.
Really?
And there's this slight bitterness at the top of the palate I'm not so keen on.
So I don't mind that bitterness.
Oh.
There is a bitter aftertaste, but it's not bad.
Still a lot of sand in it.
Yeah, bit of sand. That's the texture.
I usually add honey to it, and I'm sure our ancestors would have done the same. This plant is too nutritious not to use. These days we can find out exactly how nutritious by testing it in a lab. When you consider how close we still are physically to our hunter-gatherer ancestors, the information we're after is even more important. So we're having samples analysed at King's College London under the supervision of Dr. Tony Leeds.
Well, sea buckthorn results were absolutely fascinating because, as you know, we analysed the vitamin C content.
Indeed.
And that came out at around about 68 milligrams per 100 grams of whole fruit.
Now that's better than oranges, isn't it?
It is, yeah. I think one of the interesting things, though, is, of course, you've harvested these towards the end of the period
Absolutely, yeah.
when they're on the plant, which mean that, interestingly, even though it's been on the plant for maybe 5 months or so,
Yes.
and the levels would have fallen during that time, there's still a lot there which would make an appreciable contribution.
This is obviously very important for these hunter-gatherers, because it would have been the only fruit that would have been available at that time of year. It's obviously very important for their state of health.
And I think also it's important to remember what the requirements might have been. We think in terms of vitamin C content at the present time in the light of all the various adverse things that everybody exposes them to. But at that time, probably the critical thing would have been to have taken enough vitamin C to actually prevent scurvy. We have to remember that actually as little as 6, 8 or 10 milligrams per day actually prevented clinical scurvy.
And sea buckthorn has 10 times that amount in each glassful. When we tested sea kale, it was just as impressive. Burning a sample of sea kale under laboratory conditions is still the best way to ascertain calorific content. And we discovered sea kale has more calories than potatoes. But it was only when we analysed both raw and cooked samples under the electron microscope that our instincts were borne out. The calories are far more readily available in the cooked plant.
The best image of the raw plant, of course, we're seeing then the very small round bodies which are mostly starch granules, some may be protein, and then after the roasting there's a replacement of this with an amorphous matter which suggests that all of the starch granules have been broken down. So what you've done is you've shown very clearly that by roasting in that case that you have rendered the carbohydrate that's present in the food probably much more available, and I think this food would have been a very good energy supply.
Having these results really allows us to model the past with far greater precision than we can otherwise do.
Over-reliance on any one plant could have been catastrophic in lean times such as the winter. Our ancestors would have needed a wide variety of different plant sources for each plant type to ensure their availability. The question is, which options were worth pursuing?
We're going to carry out an experiment with the plant today, and for that we need a pestle and mortar. What I'm doing is I'm just quickly shaping up this pestle. It's a very important tool. It's not just any old stick. It needs to have a real balance to it when you use it. I've used tools like this in Africa, and if you get it right, it's easy to use, comfortable to use. I'm using a metal axe, of course. If our ancestors had made pestles like this, which we're not sure about for the Mesolithic, it would have taken them a lot longer to shape with stone tools. But they could have achieved just the same results without any difficulty. Of that, I'm certain. Of course, materials like this tend not to survive from that period. But the plant we're looking at really needs some tools to help us to process it. So this is one of the likely candidates, and it's only by carrying out experiments that we'll gain some understanding of what may have been done.
The plant we're interested in is called sea clubrush. We know its roots have a high caloric content, but we need to work out how our ancestors might have processed it.
And here you have the underwater roots, and within each of these bundles of root you have hard tubers. And I've trimmed one clear. It's about so big, the size of a biggish marble.
What we need to do is strip the outer layers from the tubers without crushing the tubers themselves. The secret isn't so much in the use of the stones as in the shape of the mortar itself, and that's based on research that Gordon has carried out in the Middle East.
Good way to warm up, Gordon.
It's certainly working anyhow. The roots, there's masses of fibres of roots and so on. All the muck is coming off very nicely.
I think that the secret seems to be not to hit it too hard. As I just use the weight of the pestle, it's starting to get more red showing now. I don't know whether you're noticing that.
I think I get this. There's a sudden improvement in the rate of exposure of the red and the stripping off of those little roots.
You can see that where I've been hammering them here with the pestle, there's actually a cycling action. The roots are going down and working their way up the edge, and around the edge of the mortar now there's this scum, which is all the hairy bits that we've cleaned off, and you can see how it's really starting to clean them up beautifully. The colour coming through there. Some of them have split. They're very brittle tuber.
The cleaning is only the start. These roots are like rocks, so they need pulverising in a flat base mortar.
That's really starting to go down now, Gordon. Mind you, it's an awful lot of work.
It is a huge
for a meal.
Starch rich though it is, the energy costs in producing it are considerable.
Wow, it's amazing how it's bulked out there. Shall we?
It's twice the volume.
I think we should try some.
Oh, let's give it a go. Nice, there's a sweetness to it, isn't there?
Yeah, and coconut texture.
And there's a lot of nutty flavour, almond.
There is a sweetness to it. It's a very mild sweetness.
That's right.
And there's a real cardboardness about it as well.
Yes, a certain chewiness to it.
I mean, it really doesn't want to be eaten, does it? And there's that fibreiness that there's always something seems to be left. It doesn't want to go.
That's right. You get left with something indissoluble in the mouth, isn't there?
We could have found something here, you know. This could be the answer to Willy Wonka's everlasting gobstopper.
At last, the sea clubrush is ready to cook. I've mixed an egg in to bind it into what's known as a damper, and I'm using a hot, flat rock heated in the fire.
That's hot. That rock's real hot.
That's going to cook well.
As dampers go, this is quite small. When I've watched Aboriginal people cooking dampers, they're normally quite large affairs. But it's a good test. It'll be fascinating to see how the flavour has been affected by this cooking. Well, it looks about done to me, Gordon.
Excellent. Without being too hard too. That's excellent.
Let's see. And there we go. Try a little bit.
Thanks.
See what you think.
That's very palatable.
Yeah.
And the texture's good too. It's improved. It's gone softer. One gets the feeling that it's going to be a very filling food and very sustaining.
It's got a real chestnut quality, almost like a stuffing. That's what it tastes like. It tastes like a stuffing. I could imagine mixing that maybe with some marjoram, and you could stuff a bird with that, just as we know today. I mean, it's surprising. But my only problem with this food is the huge amount of effort that's required to produce it.
A massive amount of effort. And despite its high caloric content as food, the calories that have been expended in getting that far are enormous. And so I can't see it being a first choice as a starch staple, caloric staple in this part of the country, in this part of the world, where other food plants that can provide the same calories are available.
We're learning as much from experiments that don't work as from those that do. In this area, sea clubrush must have been a fallback plant, an important option, but not a caloric staple. Other potential staples fare even worse.
One of the sources of food we considered that our ancestors may have been using were grass seeds. But there is often a problem with the grass seeds found in Britain, and that's a fungus called ergot. You can see it here. That's the fruit body emerging from the seed. If you make bread from seed that's infected with ergot, the bread is toxic and it drives you crazy. In fact, it can kill you.
But the coast does have reliable and safe foods in plenty, which is why it's believed the earliest people clung to the shoreline as they spread around the world. This is the far north of Scotland, a place we know Mesolithic Britons lived, and when they came here, they would have found one of my favourite resources, shellfish.
Right, I'll tell you what, Gordon, it's one of those days today. The tide's on its way out. You can see gradually the shore exposing, but the wind's blowing on shore, so there's one of these eternal battles between the tide and the wind.
Is the wind a bit windy at the moment?
The wind is holding the tide in a bit, and of course that means that we won't see so much of the beach today.
Oh, right.
But here is fantastic. You know, look at all this seaweed. In amongst all of this, we can find food, although at the moment we only see seaweed, but with a hook stick, we should find some other food. Look, mussels.
Yes. Indeed, yes, there we are.
Some good sized mussels here. Look at that, that's a nice one. And of course you wouldn't pick the really small ones, you'd let those grow on and come back another day. So, I'm not uprooting this seaweed, I'm just pulling it out the way so we can see what's really underneath it. And as we work our way down towards the shore, they should get bigger. Some really nice sized mussels here. I like to be right on the edge of the tide going out because there's a chance of seeing something trying to scuttle away.
Idea, yes.
I think it looks like a little eel.
Oh, wow.
Oh, amazing. I mean, yeah. Look at lamprey. Quite nice, we'll let him go back. He's too small to eat. But of course, as you know, in a lot of societies, the children, that would have been a child's meal, where perhaps further down the beach would have been Dad looking for something a little larger.
In darkness, the children would have cooked it up as their own little meal at the head of the beach?
Oh yeah, I don't think they've missed that. So we'll let him go. Let him go back to where he came from. Give him a little bit of cover from the cormorants. Look under a few rocks, Gordon. Oh yes, look, another load of winkles.
A massive load.
I actually just reaching with my hand there. That was a lucky find, wasn't it?
It's a very abundant resource, isn't it?
Incredibly abundant.
Now, what times of the year can you use mussels particularly?
Well, that's a thing. They're a bivalve, so they're filter feeding. So if they're near to a sewage outfall today, they're going to concentrate the muck.
And what about natural?
Well, there's a dinoflagellate algae. You get blooms of these in the oceans. They're particularly associated with cold upwelling currents of water. It is a problem, and this causes a type of poisoning that is very serious. It paralyses you, basically.
So that's serious?
Very serious.
But there's another abundant type of shellfish which was really high on the Mesolithic menu: limpets.
We don't use limpets much today because they're hard to gather. It's difficult to collect them commercially, but they are very good, and certainly our ancestors used them.
Now, how did you detach those?
I just bash them with a rock, Gordon.
Okay.
A little rock here. So the limpet secret is you've got to sneak up on them. The moment you know they're there, they clamp down.
I see. So
like that.
Yeah. Hold on.
Yeah, you have to give them quite a clout.
Right.
Gordon seems to have taken a fancy to these limpets, but my favourite kind of shell food is found only at very low tides on sandy beaches. We've no idea how our ancestors would have gathered these, but for me, using salt is the best way to gather the delicious razor shell.
What do you think?
Superb. What a huge foot. It's amazing. The amount of meat in that, presumably, is very substantial.
So how they put it down, make a fist, and pull themselves in.
Trying to put themselves down.
You never dig them out. They move far too quickly.
That's the action. That's amazing to see.
Amazing creatures. That's a good size too, and they're very good eating.
I've never tried one.
Ha
The trick is patience. If you hold the shell tightly when it emerges, the foot soon exhausts itself, and then it's easy to pull it out. Mind you, you still need to step lightly in order to gather them.
So would you reckon these razor shells are the high point of shellfish eating?
They're very good eating. I don't know why we don't eat them. It's just because, we eat with our eyes in Britain, don't we? If you go to Paris, on the streets of Paris, they sell razor shells.
Do they?
Amazing.
I like foraging on the coastline. It reminds me of time spent with Aboriginals. They have a different pace to their life. Although there's only a small window of opportunity, tide-wise, you can't rush this job. You have to go slowly and steadily and look carefully. It's a reminder of how our lives once were.
What I've got here is a little bit of horse's hoof fungus, which occurs on dead birch trees in Scotland, and I'm just fraying that up, ready for making fire. That's my tinder. It's very fine. It comes up like cotton wool. And what I need to do is to generate a spark to drop into this to get this to catch light and start smouldering. To make the spark, I'm going to use a method that we know was used in prehistory. I'm going to use this. It's one of those nodules of Amperites I collected earlier. Remember I said that nobody's really certain how it's formed? Well, my favourite story came straight from the mouth of a professor of geology, no less, is that it could even be the blood of dinosaurs. Well, that might be unlikely, but that's my favourite story without a doubt. And I reckon they must have been dragons, because you get good sparks off of this. It's interesting material with a new nodule of this, newly collected. That brown colour is an oxide layer. It's like rust on the surface. And I've got to scrape back behind that before I'll get decent sparks. Now, to strike this, I'm going to use a piece of flint. And I've got a blade here I struck off earlier. Ah, I can start to smell a slight burning smell. It smells like a cigarette lighter. And that's a good sign. It means I'm getting sparks. Now, the sparks that come off of this are very small and they're very low temperature. They're a dull red colour. So sometimes you can't always see them in daylight. You can get that smell of burning, you know you're getting somewhere. Of course, if you're using this every day on a regular basis, it's very quick because you don't have much oxide layer built up. I'm getting a good smell of burning now. That's good. Getting better sparks. Just trying to get them to fall in the right place. There we go. There's one in there now. It takes a while. The wonderful thing about this tinder is it's so combustible. Wonderful, and that's just going to grow now. You can see there's a bit of a breeze here. So I've brought another fungus with me. This is a King Alfred's cake, a cramp ball, is another name of an ash tree, Daldinia concentrica. And this is wonderful for fire lighting. And if I break this in half, you can see all these concentric rings in the middle. If I ignite this, it'll burn like a charcoal briquette. And I could have ignited it with one of these sparks, but it's more certain with this really fluffy tinder here. So I'll add that to that and get that to catch light now. Let's see. That's good. Now what I'm going to do with that is I'm going to put that into bracken. And we're in business. All I need now is the shellfish. They look good, don't they?
I'm going to use flat rocks sterilised in the fire. They're ideal for cooking the limpets. I'll lay out the mussels hinge up beside them. A neat, orderly pattern like this makes it easy to find everything later.
So Gordon, I saw you collecting a lot of these limpets. Are you worried about these algae?
After you mentioned, explained the algal business, I thought, well, maybe limpets represent a safer choice.
Yeah, well, I mean, they were very heavily used in the past, and I think that today we don't rate them as a food. Now, obviously, we're cooking them here in kind of an Aboriginal way, but if you cook them at home and you then put them in a blender and blend them up, you can make a wonderful chowder with them.
Oh, really?
It's a fantastic flavour.
So limpets are really underrated overall.
They're very underrated. Very underrated. Well, it'd be interesting to see what you make of them, because you've not eaten a lot of shellfish.
I've had very little contact with them, and of course the area where I've done so much work in the past has been Near Eastern hunter-gatherers. And there, of course, the shellfish are not such a major contributor to diet. So these are the great seed-eating cultures of their version of the Mesolithic. So this is new to me, basically.
Whack some sticks on. Of course, the question people always ask is, how do people know which things were poisonous and which weren't? And that's a real puzzle, isn't it?
It is, and of course we know from ethnographic parallels that they have set systems for testing these things, didn't they? In North America, for example, the indigenous peoples there had the young men try a little bit roasted, and then a little bit more roasted, and then a little bit boiled, and then try a little bit raw.
I've often felt that way, Gordon, with some of your concoctions. A human guinea pig.
This is character building, Ray.
Well, it's Gordon's turn for some character building.
Shall we have a look at some of the
Let's
limpets?
have a look. I'd be intrigued to see.
The limpet shell, now that it's cooled off, these ones have fallen off, but that just lifts off.
I see, and then
And that on top that's the guts on top.
the yellow.
The yellow there.
And the black too?
If we get rid of all of that, there's like a sack.
I see, yellow
And
and
then
black.
you're left with the foot.
Oh, I see. Right.
Enjoy.
Okay. That's interesting. Right.
Bit chewy.
Victory is
It
an
just lifts up.
understatement, I think. Sort of
Tasty though.
tasty, but sort of tasty eraser.
It's not that bad. I think you're being a bit harsh.
It's more flavoursome than I thought.
If they don't lift off, then they're not cooked enough. There you go. Clean that. They're good.
I'll be interested to try the other chaps.
Gordon, you've got to eat them all because you gathered loads.
I did rather overdo the limpet gathering, I have to confess.
It's all right though.
It is okay, it's just food. The body reacts to it as food.
I quite like them. I think they're good. They'll be hot. Still want to cook it out. Try that. Is
there anything to remove here?
No, just eat the whole thing.
The whole thing, right.
Oh, they're gorgeous. Take these winkles out. These shells get very, very hot to get it all the way out. Like that. There you go. See what you make of that. And it just comes out. What did our ancestors do with these, Gordon?
Chuck 'em.
They just threw them, didn't they? Now, of course, the real pièce de résistance has to be
Now, what do you eat?
all of it.
The whole lot. So
The whole thing.
there's no guts to be got rid of.
No,
So what are the different components?
I haven't a
that's the-
clue. Just eat it.
That's hot.
It's like a hot witchetty grub.
That I find is not an encouragement, Ray. Interestingly. That is very meaty and very good.
And there's a lot of it, isn't there?
A lot of it, indeed. Yeah.
But you know, of course, for our ancestors, every tide, every low tide, the beach is exposed to a greater or lesser extent. There is the opportunity to collect protein with very little effort, and that was a very significant resource of food for ancestors.
So hungry children could have something provided for them in a matter of minutes.
It's easy to imagine our ancestors sitting in this primal wood of hazel, hawthorn and birch. And just along the coast lies the final destination of this part of the journey, proof of the presence of Mesolithic Britons here. This rock is a natural shelter. It provided protection from the rain for our Stone Age ancestors for thousands of years. In the year 2000, a dig unearthed the treasures hidden on its slopes. Treasures Dr. Nicky Milner of York University has come to share. Well, I tell you what, this overhang's really fortuitous, isn't it? It's pouring with rain out there, but we're dry in here. And this was in use for thousands of years, wasn't it?
Yes, it was first in use about 9,000 years ago, and it continued for several hundred years through the Mesolithic, and then has been repeatedly visited ever since then, in later periods as well.
And what do we know about what actually happened here?
Well, we have some clues from the excavations which were taking place just in front of the rock shelter, and there was a big pile of food waste, really, a lot of shellfish and animal bones, which tells us something of what they were eating. I brought some shells along, actually, just so you can see. I mean, even though these are 9,000 years old, they are still in pretty good condition, I think. Those are the limpets.
That's amazing.
And most of it was mainly limpet.
They're tiny limpets.
They're small, I think.
I wouldn't collect limpets that small. I'd only go for larger ones.
Yes, they are, compared to what we gathered.
And I wonder if they cooked them the way we cooked ours. Just put some embers over the top, put them in the shell.
They
take it off.
also like chewy food if they were so fond of Olympics.
Well, you'd have got on really well then. I mean, you like the Olympics, don't you?
I find them slightly rubbery, Ray.
It's interesting you say about cooking, because it's very difficult to see how they were cooked, and I think sometimes we've even considered that maybe they were eating them raw, but it makes much more sense that they were cooking them, and we do sometimes get some scorching marks on them, which suggests that. And also mussels, razor shells, they show much. They're very, very fragmented in the middens. That they've really broken down, probably because they've been cooked.
But the meal that we cooked was limpet, mussel, winkle, some dog whelks, and razor shells.
That's exactly what we found here. Yes.
I don't know about you, but I find this intriguing. We're actually touching the remains of a meal.
This I've always found intriguing, and it continues. Despite years and years working with the ancient materials from the past, I still find it exciting to hold things that were held by a very different hand.
This is what it's all about, making that connection to our past.
And of course it wasn't just shellfish, although a lot of the midden itself is made up of shellfish. There's all sorts of other things, crabs, seabirds, red deer, wild boar, a huge range of different kinds of foods.
Amazing.
Even badger, actually.
Red deer would have been very important because it's very cosy in here, but it would be more comfortable if we had a fire going and we had a red deer skin to sit on. It would be a lot more comfortable. And we'd be wearing clothes not of modern materials but of skin sewn together with the sinews from the animal, the antlers to make our harpoon points. And maybe the seabird's wing feathers were used for fletching arrows used to hunt on the coast.
There are actually cut marks on the birds. On the bird bones, suggesting that the wings are being cut off. The seal as well is something else that's found on quite a lot of these sites.
That's fascinating.
And I think the seal skin and the blubber would have been really useful.
Very important indeed. Maybe they had lanterns here made of seal fat. I've seen that used by the Inuit.
These people were obviously carrying around with them a huge repository of knowledge.
One of the things that surprised us about the research we've been doing into wild foods is that it's also a reflection on how we've altered and impacted our own environment. And back when they don't look 9,000 years old, do they? I mean, when these were being eaten, Britain was a much cleaner, healthier environment than it is today. And many of the habitats that our ancestors depended upon for food no longer supply food. And I think that's been really interesting. So it's very easy for us, I think, from our sort of ivory towers of technology and computers to look down on our ancestors. But for much, much longer than our recorded history, they were able to live alongside nature without necessarily damaging or destroying it. I think they actually have a lot to teach us.
This is a fabulous journey of discovery. A unique opportunity to share knowledge, exchange ideas, and deepen our understanding of the world. I can't wait to take to the water and travel inland via our ancient wetlands, the highways of Mesolithic Britain.
And that'll be next Wednesday here on BBC Two, same time, 8 o'clock. Next tonight is our health service, a terminal case. The final part of Can Jerry Robinson Fix the NHS? A smash hit this Christmas, now we get the full story.